The champagne flute shattered against marble, crystal exploding into 1,000 glittering pieces that caught the chandelier light like falling stars. Amara didn't flinch. She'd learned months ago that fear was currency in this house, and she refused to spend it cheaply. Dante Kang stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, his hand still raised from where he'd thrown the glass, his face carved from stone and barely controlled rage. Behind him, 6 of his men froze mid-conversation, their hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons before recognizing the source of their boss's fury. She descended another step, the crimson silk of her dress whispering against her dark skin like a secret being told. The gown clung to every curve deliberately, strategically, a declaration of war wrapped in haute couture. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo that exposed the graceful line of her neck, diamond earrings she'd found in the room catching light with each measured step. Her makeup was flawless, her expression calm, her brown eyes meeting his dark ones without wavering. "Where?" Dante said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed. "Are you going dressed like that?" Amara paused 3 steps from the bottom, tall enough now to meet his gaze at eye level. She let the silence stretch, let him see that she wasn't intimidated by his tone or his reputation, or the 6 armed men watching this confrontation like it was a theater performance they hadn't bought tickets for. "Out," she said simply. The word landed like a gunshot in the tense quiet of the mansion's entrance hall. One of the men, a stocky enforcer named Jin, actually took a step backward. Another made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh or a cough disguising shock. Dante's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his sharp cheekbone. He was handsome in that dangerous way that made smart women cross the street and foolish ones move closer. Korean heritage gave him elegant bone structure and smooth, pale skin, but years of violence had carved hardness into every line of his face. He wore a black suit tailored so perfectly, it probably cost more than most people's cars, his dark hair styled with careless precision that took meticulous effort to achieve. "You don't leave this house without my permission," he said, each word clipped and precise. "You know this." "I know what you've told me," Amara replied, descending the final steps until she stood on the marble floor, close enough now that she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle. "I don't recall agreeing to it." She moved to walk past him toward the massive front doors. His hand shot out, not touching her but blocking her path, his palm against the wall beside her shoulder. She stopped, not because she had to, but because choosing when to stop was its own form of power. 3 months, Dante said quietly, his face inches from hers now, his breath warm against her cheek. 3 months you've been here. 3 months you've been safe, protected, given everything you could possibly need. And now you think you can just walk out my door in a dress that looks like an invitation to every man in Seoul. "I think," Amara said, turning her head to look directly into his eyes, "that what I wear and where I go stopped being your decision the moment you made me a prisoner instead of a guest." Something flickered in his expression, too quick to name. Anger, certainly, but something else underneath it, something that looked almost like pain. "You're not a prisoner," he said. "Then move your arm." The standoff lasted 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. The men behind them had gone completely still, barely breathing, witnessing something that would be whispered about in every corner of Dante's organization by morning. Their boss, the man who'd built an empire on fear and absolute control, being challenged by the woman he'd kept hidden in his mansion for 3 months. Finally, slowly, Dante lowered his arm. Amara didn't smile, didn't show triumph. She simply walked past him toward the door, her heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of a countdown timer. "Follow her," Dante said quietly to his men. "Every step, but don't interfere. I want to know where she goes, who she meets, what she does. Report everything." "Boss," Jin started, concern in his voice, "if she's going to." "I said follow, not stop." Dante's voice could have frozen fire. Do you have a problem with those instructions? No, boss. Amara reached the front door, placed her hand on the ornate handle. She paused, turned back to look at Dante across the expanse of marble and tension. Don't wait up, she said. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. Dante stood perfectly still for 10 seconds. Then he walked to the bar cart in the corner of the hall, poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, and drank it in one swallow. Should we? Another guard began. Get out, Dante said softly, all of you now. They scattered like leaves before a storm. Alone in the vast entrance hall, Dante poured another drink and didn't touch it. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me, he said when someone answered. She's moving. Yes, tonight, in the red dress. No, I didn't stop her, because I need to know if I'm right about what she's planning. A pause. If I'm wrong, she dies. If I'm right. Another pause, longer this time. If I'm right, then everyone who thought they could use her against me learns what happens when you threaten what's mine. He ended the call and finally drank the second whiskey. Then he walked to his office, opened a hidden panel in the wall, and began arming himself for war. Outside, Amara climbed into the black car that had been waiting 3 blocks away, exactly where she'd arranged for it to be. The driver didn't speak, didn't ask questions. He'd been paid too much for questions. The Lotus Hotel, she said. Downtown, take the long route. She knew Dante's men would be following. She was counting on it. In her clutch purse, hidden beneath lipstick and a compact mirror, was a small device that would record everything said in the hotel room she was about to enter. Insurance, leverage, and possibly the only thing that would keep her alive past midnight. 3 months ago, Amara had been working late at the art gallery where she curated exhibitions, lost in paperwork and completely unaware that her life was about to detonate. She'd heard voices in the storage room, aggressive and threatening, and had moved to investigate before her brain caught up with her feet. Through a crack in the door, she'd seen them. Dante Kang and 4 of his men, standing over a bound and gagged man she didn't recognize. The conversation had been in Korean, rapid and harsh, but she didn't need translation to understand executions. She'd backed away carefully, quietly, making it almost to the exit before a floorboard betrayed her. The next 6 hours were a blur of fear and negotiation. Dante had been coldly pragmatic. She'd seen too much. He had 3 options: kill her, buy her silence, or keep her close until the situation resolved itself. She'd convinced him that killing an American woman would bring heat he didn't need. Buying her silence was impossible because she had no price. That left option 3. You'll stay at my home, he'd said, his gun still pointed casually at her chest. You'll be comfortable, you'll be safe, you'll be watched every moment of every day. And when I'm certain your testimony can't hurt me, you'll be free to go. And if I refuse? He'd smiled then, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. Then I choose option 1, and your body is never found. So let me ask you, Miss Amara Chen, how much do you value your life? She'd valued it enough to get in the car, but not enough to become a docile prisoner. For 3 months she'd played the role. Compliant, quiet, no trouble. She'd eaten gourmet meals in her luxurious prison, read books from his extensive library, and carefully, meticulously gathered information. She'd learned that Dante controlled most of Seoul's underground economy: gambling, protection, strategic violence. He was 32 years old and had inherited his father's empire at 25 after the old man died in what was officially ruled a heart attack and unofficially known to be poison. She'd learned that he had enemies, lots of them, and that recently those enemies had been moving against him, testing his defenses, looking for weaknesses. She'd learned that 2 weeks ago, a rival boss named Marcus he had reached out through back channels, suggesting a meeting, neutral ground, a conversation about territory and peace. And she'd learned, through careful eavesdropping and one very informative moment, when Jin had drunk too much and talked too freely. That Marcus Yi was planning something bigger than peace talks. The car wound through Seoul's glittering nighttime streets, neon reflecting off wet pavement from an earlier rain. Amara checked her appearance in the compact mirror, not vanity but strategy. Everything tonight depended on people seeing exactly what she wanted them to see. A woman in a red dress, Dante's kept woman, finally making a break for freedom. The perfect bait. The Lotus Hotel rose 40 stories into the Seoul sky, all glass and steel and money. Amara had never been there before, but she'd researched it thoroughly. Marcus Yi owned it through a shell corporation. Every security camera, every staff member, every square inch of the building was under his control. Walking in there wearing this dress was either the smartest thing she'd ever done or the last. The car stopped at the entrance. The driver finally spoke. "Last chance to change your mind, miss." Amara smiled, and it wasn't entirely fake. "I changed my mind 3 months ago when I decided I wasn't going to be anyone's prisoner. This is me following through." She stepped out of the car into the cool night air, and heads turned immediately. The red dress did exactly what it was designed to do, announce her presence like a trumpet call before battle. She walked through the hotel's golden revolving doors and directly to the elevators. No hesitation, no looking around nervously like someone who was lost or unsure. She moved like she owned the building, and that confidence was its own disguise. The elevator attendant, a young man in a crisp uniform, tried not to stare at her and failed completely. "Penthouse floor," Amara said. "That's restricted access, miss. You'll need a key card." She smiled at him. "I'm expected." He made a call on his radio, spoke in quick Korean, listened to the response. His eyes widened slightly. "Of course, miss, my apologies." The elevator began its smooth ascent toward the top of the building. Amara watched the numbers climb and forced her breathing to stay calm and even. Fear was normal. Terror was understandable, but neither would help her survive what came next. The penthouse floor was elegant and understated, all dark wood and soft lighting. 2 men in suits stood outside the only door on the floor. They were trying to look like hotel security and failing, because their bulges weren't from poor tailoring. "Amara Chen," she said before they could ask, "for Marcus Yi." One of them spoke into a radio, listened, nodded. "He's expecting you, but we need to search you first." "Of course." She stood still while they patted her down professionally but thoroughly. They found the clutch purse, opened it, examined the lipstick and compact and the tiny recording device. "What's this?" one asked in accented English. "Insurance," Amara said calmly. "If I don't walk out of this hotel alive tonight, that device uploads everything it's recorded to 3 different journalists. So I suggest you let me keep it, and I suggest that whatever your boss has planned, he remembers that I'm not as powerless as I might look." The guards exchanged glances. Another radio conversation. This one took longer. Finally, one of them handed back her purse with the device still inside. "He says you have courage. He hopes it's not stupidity." "So do I," Amara said. They opened the door. The penthouse suite was a study in controlled opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seoul's glittering skyline. The city spread out below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Modern furniture in blacks and grays occupied the space with minimalist precision, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers, the kind of smooth instrumental that was meant to relax but somehow made everything feel more dangerous. Marcus Yi stood by the window, a glass of wine in his hand, looking every inch the civilized businessman rather than the crime lord he actually was. He was older than Dante, maybe 45. With silver threading through his black hair and expensive wire-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a university professor than someone who'd ordered at least a dozen murders in the past year alone. "Miss Chen," he said, turning from the window with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The famous woman in Dante Kang's Gilded Cage. I was beginning to think you were a myth he'd invented to make himself seem more interesting. I'm very real, Amara said, staying near the door, her posture relaxed but her weight balanced for quick movement if needed. And I'm no longer in anyone's cage. Clearly, his gaze traveled over her dress, appreciative but clinical. That's quite a statement piece you're wearing. Red, the color of passion, of blood, of revolution. Which meaning should I interpret tonight? All three, potentially. Marcus laughed, genuine surprise in the sound. I like you already. Please sit. Can I offer you wine, whiskey, water? Water. I prefer to keep my mind clear during negotiations. Negotiations. He poured water from a crystal decanter into a glass and brought it to her himself, a gesture that was either hospitable or a power play. Is that what this is? Amara took the glass but didn't drink yet, watching for any sign of tampering, any suspicious cloudiness or residue. The water looked clean. She took a small sip, let it sit in her mouth for a moment before swallowing. No strange taste, no immediate burning, probably safe. You sent word 2 weeks ago through intermediaries, she said. You wanted a meeting with Dante about territory disputes, a peace offering you called it. I did. You're planning to kill him. The smile dropped from Marcus's face like a mask removed. Behind his glasses, his eyes went cold and calculating. That's a dangerous accusation to make while standing in my hotel, surrounded by my men. It's not an accusation, it's a statement of fact. Amara set down the water glass and met his gaze steadily. The meeting you proposed is a trap. You've arranged for shooters in 3 locations, time to create crossfire. Dante's security detail will be neutralized first, then him. You'll blame it on a third party, probably the Russian syndicate that's been pushing into southern Seoul. Clean, efficient, and it removes your biggest competitor. Marcus was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved to the bar, poured himself more wine, and when he turned back, he was smiling again. You're either very well informed or very good at bluffing. Which is it? Does it matter? What matters is what I'm offering. And what exactly are you offering, Miss Chen? Access. Amara walked further into the room now, her heels silent on the plush carpet. You want Dante dead, but he's too careful, too protected. You can't get close to him without triggering alarms, but I'm already inside. I've been living in his home for 3 months. I know his routines, his security protocols, his blind spots. And in exchange for this information, freedom, money, a new identity and safe passage out of Korea. She paused deliberately. And his head on a platter because the man who imprisoned me deserves everything that's coming to him. It was a good lie. She delivered it with the perfect mix of bitter anger and cold calculation. She even managed to make her hands shake slightly, as if the rage was barely contained beneath her calm exterior. Marcus studied her for a long time, and Amara could almost see him working through the angles, checking for traps, weighing probabilities. Why now? He finally asked. 3 months you've been his prisoner, why break free tonight? Because tonight I learned that he's planning to move me, somewhere more secure, more isolated, a compound in the mountains where I'll have even less chance of escape. Another lie, smooth as silk. This was my last window, I took it. And Dante just let you walk out wearing that dress. The man who controls half of Seoul let his valuable hostage stroll out the front door. He didn't let me do anything. I left. He's probably tearing the city apart looking for me right now. Actually, Marcus said, pulling out his phone and showing her the screen, he's doing something much more interesting. The phone displayed a live security feed. Dante, alone in his office, methodically loading weapons and strapping on body armor. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, checking each gun, each knife, each piece of equipment with professional focus. My people have been watching his mansion since you left, Marcus explained. He armed himself immediately after you walked out, sent his men to follow you but went to prepare for war himself. Does that seem like a man frantically searching for an escaped prisoner? Or does it seem like a man preparing for exactly what he knew was coming? Amara's heart kicked against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral. Then he's smarter than I gave him credit for, which means we need to move fast before he what? Crashes our little meeting. Marcus set down his wine glass with careful precision. Miss Chen, I think we both know Dante Kang is already on his way here. In fact, I'd estimate he's approximately 10 minutes out, probably coming in through the service entrance to avoid cameras. Which means this conversation has been very enlightening, but not in the way you intended. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Amara recalculated rapidly, running through scenarios and outcomes, looking for the angle that kept her alive. You knew, she said quietly, from the beginning. I suspected. Dante's kept you hidden for 3 months, not because you witnessed something, but because he's been trying to figure out what game you're playing. And tonight, you showed your hand. The question is, whose side are you really on? My own. Wrong answer. Marcus gestured, and the 2 guards from the hallway entered the room, weapons drawn. The correct answer is that you're working for Dante. This whole performance, the red dress, the dramatic escape, showing up at my hotel, it's all theater. He sent you here to confirm my plans, to record my confession, to give him legal justification for whatever violent response he's preparing. That's not the recording device in your purse. You told my men it was insurance, that it uploads to journalists if you die. But I think it uploads to Dante's legal team regardless of whether you live or die. Very clever. Create a digital paper trail showing I confessed to planning his assassination. That plays well in front of police and prosecutors when the bodies start piling up. Amara didn't deny it. There was no point now. Instead, she shifted tactics. If you think I'm working for Dante, and you think he's on his way here, why are you still talking to me instead of running? Marcus smiled, and this time it was genuinely amused. Because, Miss Chen, I'm not the one who needs to run. He pulled out his phone again, pressed a single button. Now. The lights in the penthouse went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in red glow. And through the windows, Amara saw something that made her blood freeze. The building across the street, a luxury apartment complex with a clear line of sight to Dante's mansion. Every window on the top 3 floors lit up simultaneously, and in each window she could see the distinctive silhouette of someone holding a rifle. You wanted to know my plan, Marcus said conversationally, his voice calm in the crimson darkness. Here it is. While Dante races to this hotel to save you, thinking I'm the threat, my real team is positioned to turn his mansion into a shooting gallery. Every approach, every window, every possible angle of defense. His men are there, his weapons are there, his power base is there. And in approximately 8 minutes, it all burns. No, the word came out strangled. Amara lunged for her purse, for the recording device, to warn Dante somehow, but one of the guards grabbed her wrist with bruising force. I'm curious, Marcus continued, walking to the window to admire his strategic positioning. When the shooting starts, when Dante realizes he's been outmaneuvered, will he regret using you as bait? Or will he have already figured out what I suspect, which is that somewhere along the way, you stopped being his prisoner and started being something else entirely? You're insane. Those are dozens of people in that mansion. Staff, guards, people who have nothing to do with your war. Acceptable losses in a necessary restructuring. Marcus checked his watch. 7 minutes now. You know, in different circumstances, I would have enjoyed working with you. You have the mind for this business. But you made your choice when you put on that red dress for him instead of against him. The door to the penthouse exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. The heavy wood splintered and flew across the room as someone, crashed through it with devastating force. The guard holding Amara's wrist released her immediately, both men spinning toward the threat with weapons raised. Dante stood in the ruined doorway, and he looked like violence personified. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye, his suit jacket was torn, and he held a gun in each hand. But it was his expression that made even Marcus take a step back. Cold, focused rage that made his earlier anger about the red dress seem like mild annoyance. 7 minutes, Dante said, his voice arctic. That's how long I've known about your little ambush plan. Thanks to Amara, who called my head of security the moment she left your elevator. My men have had 6.5 minutes to evacuate the mansion and reposition to those apartments you're so proud of. So when your shooters try to fire, they're going to find themselves in a crossfire of their own. Marcus's face went pale. He reached for his phone, but Dante shot it out of his hand with casual precision. The device shattered, components scattering across expensive carpet. You, Marcus started. Used her as bait. Yes. Counted on your arrogance. Absolutely. Knew you'd try something exactly this stupid because you've been desperate to take my territory ever since your Chinese investors pulled out last month. Dante's smile was a knife edge. I've been 10 steps ahead of you this entire time, Marcus. The only question was whether you'd be smart enough to realize it before you committed to something this catastrophically stupid. The guards were calculating odds, weighing options. 2 of them against Dante, who was already wounded and outnumbered, should have been an easy choice. Then 6 more men appeared in the hallway behind Dante, all armed, all ready. Drop your weapons, Dante said quietly, or confirm that your loyalty to Marcus is worth dying for. The guards looked at their boss. Marcus said nothing, his jaw tight, fury and fear warring in his expression. The guns hit the floor with dull thuds. Smart, Dante said. He gestured to his men. Secure them, Marcus stays with me. As his team moved to restrain the guards, Dante finally looked at Amara. Really looked at her, taking in the red dress, the composed expression, the way she'd positioned herself near a potential exit despite the guard's grip. Are you hurt? He asked. No. Good. He turned back to Marcus. You have 10 seconds to call off your sniper teams before I make this very personal. They won't answer. Protocol is radio silence once positioned. Then you better hope my men are feeling merciful when they take those positions. Marcus's confidence cracked completely. This isn't over. You kill me, you start a war with every. I'm not going to kill you, Dante interrupted. That would be too quick, too clean. You threatened what's mine. So instead, I'm going to destroy everything you've built. Your hotels, your businesses, your reputation, your alliances. I'm going to dismantle your entire organization piece by piece, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows why. Because you thought you could use a woman as a casualty in your pathetic power play. He nodded to his men. Take him to the 3rd location. You know what to do. They dragged Marcus toward the door, the older man's composure finally breaking as he started shouting threats and promises and desperate bargains. Dante ignored all of it, his attention now fully on Amara. They were alone in the penthouse now, surrounded by broken wood and dropped weapons, and the soft jazz still playing incongruously from hidden speakers. The red dress, Dante said finally. You wore it knowing I'd follow. Yes. You walked into his trap knowing it was a trap. Yes. And you trusted that I'd figure it out in time to save you. Amara met his gaze steadily. I trusted that you'd be smart enough to see what I was offering. Bait, yes, but also proof, a confession, everything you needed to move against Marcus legally and permanently. You could have died. I've been risking death since the moment I saw you in that storage room 3 months ago. At least tonight I got to choose how. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, he holstered his weapons and walked toward her. Not threatening, not aggressive, just closing the distance between them until he stood close enough that she could see the cut above his eye was deeper than she'd thought, still bleeding slightly. You're not a prisoner, he said quietly. You haven't been for weeks. I kept telling myself I was keeping you safe, that witnessing that execution made you a liability I needed to control. But the truth is, I kept you close because I wanted you close. And tonight when you walked out in this dress, I wasn't angry because you were leaving. I was terrified you weren't coming back. The words hung in the air between them, more vulnerable than anything Amara had expected to hear from a man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness and fear. She searched his face for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was another layer of control disguised as honesty. All she found was exhaustion, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. "You kept me prisoner," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions churning in her chest. "You put guards on my door, monitored my every move, controlled where I could go and what I could do. That's not protection, Dante. That's ownership." "I know." He didn't look away, didn't make excuses. "I know exactly what I did, and I know why I did it. Because in my world, anything valuable becomes a target. Anyone I care about becomes leverage. And from the moment you showed up in that storage room with defiance in your eyes instead of fear, I knew you were going to be dangerous to me in ways that had nothing to do with testimony or witnesses. So you locked me away. So I tried to keep you safe while I figured out how to feel something other than empty for the first time in 7 years." He raised his hand slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to move away if she wanted. When she didn't, he gently touched her cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. "I failed. On both counts. You were never safe because Marcus was always going to see you as a weakness to exploit. And I was never going to stop feeling this, no matter how many walls I built or rules I enforced." Amara closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself one moment of vulnerability. "I hate that you made me a prisoner. I hate that you took my choice away. I hate that I spent 3 months feeling like a bird in a cage, watching the world through windows I couldn't open. I know. But I also hate that Marcus thought he could use me as collateral damage. I hate that he was willing to kill dozens of people just to eliminate you. And I hate most of all that when I realized what he was planning, the first thing I thought about wasn't my own escape." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. "It was how to warn you without getting you killed in the process." Dante's expression shifted, something fierce and protective flashing across his features. "You called my security team from the elevator. Moment I confirmed what Marcus was planning. I gave them the building locations, the probable sniper positions, everything I'd overheard in his security protocols. I knew you'd be coming for me, so I made sure your people would be ready for his ambush." She paused, measuring her next words carefully. "I didn't do it because I forgive you for imprisoning me. I did it because somewhere in the last 3 months, I stopped seeing you as just a captor and started seeing you as someone worth saving." Worth saving. He said it like the concept was foreign, like no one had ever applied those words to him before. "Amara, I've killed 17 people personally and ordered the deaths of at least 40 more. I've built an empire on fear and violence and carefully calculated cruelty. What exactly about that is worth saving?" Part that reads philosophy books in your study at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. The part that keeps photos of your younger sister hidden in your desk drawer even though she died 10 years ago. The part that pays the medical bills for your employees' families and pretends it's just good business sense. Amara stepped closer, closing the last bit of distance between them. "The part that was terrified I wouldn't come back tonight, not because you'd lose a valuable witness, but because you'd lose me." His hand moved from her cheek to her neck, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "How did you know about my sister?" "I've had 3 months in your house with very little to do except observe. You're not as unreadable as you think you are, Dante, not to someone who's paying attention." "And you were paying attention." "Every single day." She reached up, her fingers gentle as they touched the cut above his eye. "This needs stitches. It needs a lot of things, most of which can wait until I'm sure you're safe." He pulled out his phone, checked something on the screen, his expression darkening. "My team has secured all 3 sniper positions. Marcus's men are in custody. The mansion is clear. No casualties on our side. And his side. 4 wounded, none fatally. I'm not a monster, Amara. I don't kill when I don't have to. He pocketed the phone and looked at her seriously. But I need you to understand something. After tonight, after what you did, every enemy I have will know you're not just a prisoner or a witness. They'll know you're important to me. That makes you a permanent target. Staying near me is probably the most dangerous decision you could make. And if I leave? Something painful crossed his face. Then you leave. I'll give you money, documents, protection until you're wherever you want to be. New identity, new life, complete freedom. You'll never have to see me or think about these 3 months again. That's not what I asked. Amara took his hand, the one that had held guns and signed death warrants, and also turned pages of poetry late at night when the darkness got too heavy. I asked what happens if I leave. To you. Dante was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Honestly, I go back to being exactly what I was before you witnessed that execution. Cold, efficient, empty. I run my empire, eliminate my enemies, accumulate power that means nothing because there's no one I want to share it with. I survive, but I don't live. And if I stay? If you stay, everything changes. I can't offer you safety, but I can offer you choice. I can't promise you a normal life, but I can promise you'll never be a prisoner again. You want to leave the mansion, you leave. You want to meet friends, take trips, pursue your career. You do it with security that protects without controlling. You want to walk away from me entirely but stay in Seoul. That's your decision, not mine. You're describing partnership, not ownership. I'm describing the only way I can imagine this working without destroying both of us. He squeezed her hand gently. I spent 3 months trying to control you because control is all I know. But tonight you proved that you're stronger than any cage I could build. So instead of trying to own you, I'm asking if you'd consider staying by choice. Not as my prisoner, not even as my protected witness, but as someone who sees all the darkness in me and still thinks there's something worth saving. Amara looked at him for a long time, at this dangerous man who'd imprisoned her and terrified her and somehow, impossibly, made her feel more alive than she'd felt in years. She thought about the 3 months in his mansion, the slow evolution from captive to something more complicated. She thought about the moment she'd overheard Marcus's plans, and her immediate instinct had been to warn Dante, not escape. She thought about the red dress she'd chosen deliberately, knowing exactly what it would mean and what it would provoke. I have conditions, she said finally. Hope flared in his expression, quickly controlled but unmistakable. Name them. First, I'm not your property, not your possession, not your kept woman, not your trophy. If I stay, it's as your equal partner in whatever this becomes. That means I have real power in your organization, not just the appearance of it. Agreed. Second, no more secrets about the business. If you're planning something dangerous, I know about it. If there's a threat, I'm informed. You don't get to protect me by keeping me ignorant. That's going to be harder, but yes, agreed. Third, I want back into my life. My career, my friends, my identity as Amara Chen, the art curator, not just Amara Chen, the Mafia boss's woman. I'll take the security. I'll be smart about threats, but I won't disappear into your shadow. Absolutely agreed. And fourth, she stepped even closer, her body almost against his now, her voice dropping to something more intimate. If I stay, it's because I choose you, not because I'm trapped or afraid or see you as a lesser evil. It's because despite everything, despite the violence and the danger and the absolute insanity of this situation, I look at you and see someone I want to know beyond the surface. Someone I'm willing to risk everything to understand. Dante's other hand came up to frame her face, his touch reverent and careful, like she was something precious that might break. I don't deserve that choice. Probably not, but I'm making it anyway. She smiled slightly. I wore the red dress knowing you'd follow. I walked into Marcus's trap knowing you'd come. I did all of it because somewhere in 3 months of captivity, I started to trust that beneath the monster everyone fears, There's a man worth fighting for. Amara. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a plea and a promise all at once. If you stay, I will spend every day proving you didn't make a mistake. I will give you the world if you ask for it, or I'll give you space if that's what you need. But I will never, ever take your choice away again. Then here's my choice. She closed the final distance between them, her hand sliding up his chest to rest against his shoulders. I'm staying. Not because you're keeping me, but because I want to see what we become when the cage is gone and all that's left is choice. He kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle or careful or tentative. It was fierce and desperate and full of 3 months of tension and tonight's terror, and the profound relief of two people finding each other on the other side of violence. His hands tangled in her hair, careful of her updo, but unable to maintain the distance anymore. She pressed against him, feeling his heartbeat racing as fast as hers, tasting blood from his cut lip and not caring. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "The red dress," he murmured. "I thought I was angry because you were leaving, but I was really angry because you looked so beautiful that it hurt to breathe, and I was terrified I'd never see you like that again." "You'll see it again," Amara said. "Whenever I decide to wear it, because that's mine now, that power, not yours to control or forbid or dictate." "I wouldn't dare try." He pulled back slightly, his thumb tracing her lower lip. "We should leave. This building belongs to Marcus, and even with his organization in chaos, staying here isn't smart." "Agreed, but Dante." "Yes. When we get back to the mansion, we're redecorating my room. If I'm staying by choice, I'm making it actually mine. No locks on the outside of doors, no guards monitoring my movements, no gilded cage pretending to be protection. Done. You can redecorate the entire mansion if you want. Burn it down and build something new, whatever makes you feel like it's home instead of prison." She kissed him again, softer this time, a promise rather than desperation. "I don't need to burn it down. I just need to know I can leave whenever I want and you'll trust I'll come back. That might be the hardest thing you've ever asked me to do." "Good, then we're both taking risks." She stepped back, smoothing down the red dress that had started this entire chain of events. "Now let's go home. And Dante, next time you want to know where I'm going dressed like this, try asking instead of demanding." He laughed, a real sound that transformed his face from dangerous to almost boyish. "Yes, ma'am." They walked out of the penthouse together, past the guards who carefully didn't look at them, into an elevator that descended toward ground level and whatever future they were building together. Amara caught their reflection in the mirrored walls, her in red silk that had been chosen as battle armor and had become something else entirely. Him in torn, expensive suit with blood on his face and his hand intertwined with hers. "We look like we've been through a war," she observed. "We have been, and we won. What happens now? With Marcus, with his organization, with all the enemies who will see tonight as opportunity. Now we remind everyone why they fear the name Dante Kang, and we introduce them to the woman who's even more dangerous than I am because she chooses to stand beside me instead of against me." He squeezed her hand. "Together, that's what happens now." The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, where Dante's team was waiting. Jin's eyes widened when he saw them together, saw the way his boss held her hand like a lifeline, saw the red dress and the blood and the unmistakable shift in dynamic. "Boss," Jin said carefully, "the mansion is secure, the cars are ready. Where do you want to go?" "Home," Dante said simply. Then he looked at Amara. "Unless you want to go somewhere else first." It was such a small thing, asking her preference instead of deciding for her, but it was everything. "Home," Amara agreed. "But Dante, tomorrow I'm going back to the gallery. I've been away from my life for 3 months, time to reclaim it." "I'll assign security." "I'll accept security, see the difference." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man learning what it meant to give power instead of take it. I'm learning." They walked out of the Lotus Hotel into the Seoul night, the city glittering around them like a kingdom they'd just conquered together. Behind them, Marcus's empire was crumbling. Ahead of them, dangers and enemies and complications that would require everything they had to survive. But for now, in this moment, they had something neither of them had expected to find: choice. Real, genuine choice about who they were and what they became together. The red dress whispered against Amara's legs as she walked, and she thought about hanging it in Dante's office tomorrow. Not as a trophy or a memory, but as a reminder. The night he'd snapped wasn't the night he'd lost control. It was the night he'd realized he never had it. And that surrender, that acknowledgement of her power and her choice and her right to walk outdoors and come back when she decided, that was the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet, but both were willing to risk everything to discover. In the car, surrounded by armed guards and driving through streets controlled by their enemies, Dante kept hold of her hand. Not possessive, not controlling, just connected. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing to come back, for seeing past the monster, for wearing that dress and starting a war that needed to start." He looked at her, and his eyes held something she'd never seen there before: peace. "For teaching me that the strongest chains are the ones we choose to wear, and that real power is giving someone the freedom to leave and trusting they'll stay." Amara leaned against his shoulder, careful of his injuries, feeling the solid reality of him beside her. "We're going to have to figure out a lot of things. How this works, what we become, how I exist in your world without being consumed by it." "We will together." "Together," she agreed. And somewhere in the Seoul night, as the car carried them toward a future that was terrifying and exhilarating and completely uncertain, Amara Chen smiled. Because for the first time in 3 months, she wasn't a prisoner or a witness or a pawn in someone else's game. She was exactly what she'd always been, but had almost forgot: free. The red dress had done its job. Now it was time to see what came after. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below telling us what you think happens next for Amara and Dante. And make sure you subscribe, because we've got more intense, heart-pounding stories coming your way that you won't want to miss. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most powerful choice is deciding who you want to become. See you in the next story.